Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UHS Frontier and watched the stars through the main viewing screen. His ship had been traveling through space for 3 months now, searching for new worlds that humans could visit and maybe live on someday. The year was 2247, and humans had built homes on 12 different star systems already. Jake loved his job because every day brought something new to discover. The Frontier was not a big ship, but it was fast and had good equipment for finding planets and studying them. Jake's crew of 20 people were all experts at their jobs. They had been working together for 2 years and trusted each other completely. Lieutenant Danny Rodriguez ran the engine room and could fix anything that broke. Dr. Katie Williams was their science officer, who studied planets and space. Commander Ryan Foster handled security and made sure everyone stayed safe during dangerous missions. On this day, they were near a star system called Kepler 442 that no human had ever visited before. The ship's computers had found signals coming from that area that seemed strange. Jake wanted to know what was making those signals because they did not match anything in the human database of known space phenomena. "Captain, I am picking up something very large on our sensors," Katie said from her station. Her voice sounded worried, which made Jake pay attention immediately. Katie never worried about small things. "How large are we talking about?" Jake asked as he walked over to look at her screen. "Sir, this is bigger than anything we have ever seen before. The computer says there are at least 50 objects and each one is the size of a small moon." Jake felt his heart start beating faster. Humans had never found anything that big in space except for planets and moons and stars. Are they natural objects or did someone build them? Katie's fingers moved quickly over her controls as she tried to get more information. "Captain, these are definitely artificial. They are made of materials that do not exist in nature. And sir, they are moving in formation like a fleet of ships." The bridge became very quiet as everyone stopped what they were doing to listen. Jake had trained for many years to be a starship captain, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Humans had always wondered if other intelligent life existed in the galaxy, but they had never found proof until now. "Can you tell if they have noticed us?" Jake asked. "I don't think so, sir. We are still very far away and our ship is small compared to them." Jake thought carefully about what to do next. His orders were to explore new areas of space, but also to avoid dangerous situations that could hurt his crew. These alien ships were so big that just one of them could probably destroy the Frontier without any trouble. "Danny, how fast can we get back to Earth if we leave right now?" Jake asked over the communication system. "Captain, at maximum speed it would take us about 6 weeks to reach home." Danny's voice came back from the engine room. Jake was about to give the order to return to Earth when Katie spoke again. "Sir, they are changing course. All 50 ships are now heading directly toward our solar system." The blood in Jake's veins turned cold. Earth was completely unprepared for an alien invasion. The human space fleet was designed to protect trade routes and explore new worlds, not fight a war against enemies with technology that was clearly much more advanced than anything humans had built. "Send an emergency message to Earth immediately," Jake ordered. "Tell them we have found a large alien fleet heading toward our home system. Include all the data we have collected about their ships." As the communication officer sent the warning message, Jake made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Instead of running away, he ordered the Frontier to follow the alien fleet from a safe distance. His crew needed to learn as much as possible about these aliens so Earth would have some chance of defending itself. For 3 weeks, they followed the massive alien ships through space. Jake's crew worked without rest to study the aliens and their technology. What they learned was terrifying. The alien ships used energy sources that humans did not understand. Their weapons could destroy entire planets. Their technology was at least 1,000 years more advanced than anything humans had ever imagined. The aliens called themselves Zephyrians, and they had been traveling through the galaxy for thousands of years, conquering every intelligent species they found. They did not destroy the species they conquered. Instead, they used them as workers and slaves to build more ships and weapons for their empire. When the alien fleet reached Earth's solar system, the human defense forces tried to fight them. Admiral Lisa Carter commanded all the human ships that were protecting Earth. She was brave and smart and had trained her entire life to protect humanity from any threat. But the Zephyrian weapons made human ships stop working without even destroying them. The aliens wanted to capture the human ships intact so they could study human technology. The battle for Earth lasted only 6 hours. Every human military ship was disabled and captured. The orbital defense platforms that protected Earth's cities were turned off by some kind of alien technology that humans could not understand or stop. Jake watched it all happen from his hiding place behind one of Jupiter's moons. Dr. Alex Bennett was working in his laboratory on Earth when the aliens attacked. He was one of the smartest people alive and spent his time studying life forms from other planets. When the Zephyrian ships appeared in Earth's sky, Alex immediately started trying to understand their technology and their language. He was the first human to figure out what the aliens really wanted. The Zephyrians had grown lazy over thousands of years of conquest. They no longer invented new things or solved problems in creative ways. Instead, they forced the species they conquered to do all the thinking and inventing for them. They had studied humans for a long time and decided that human creativity and ability to adapt to new situations was exactly what their empire needed. Within 1 month, every major human city had surrendered to the Zephyrians. Governor Maria Santos of the Mars colony tried to keep fighting, but eventually had to give up when the aliens threatened to destroy the domes that kept the air breathable for the million humans. Living on Mars, Jake Morrison and his crew were among the last free humans in the galaxy. They spent months hiding in empty star systems and asteroid fields, watching helplessly as their entire species was enslaved. The Zephyrians were very efficient at organizing their new human workers. They separated families and sent people to different worlds so no one could organize any resistance. The age of human freedom had ended, and the age of human slavery had begun. 5 years had passed since the Zephyrians conquered humanity, and the galaxy looked very different now. Every human who had once been free was now a worker in the alien empire. They lived in gray buildings that all looked the same and ate food that tasted like nothing. The aliens had taken away everything that made humans feel human. Danny Rodriguez woke up every morning at the same time in his small room on the factory world of Sirion 7. He had once been an engineer who loved solving problems and building new things. Now he spent 14 hours every day fixing alien machines that he was not allowed to understand completely. The Zephyrians only taught humans enough to do their jobs, but never enough to create anything new. The factory where Danny worked was enormous. It stretched for miles in every direction and had thousands of humans working inside it. The building had no windows because the aliens did not want humans to see the sky or remember what freedom looked like. Bright artificial light stayed on all the time, so no one could tell if it was day or night outside. Every human worker wore a small device on their neck that the aliens called a compliance monitor. The device watched everything they did and listened to everything they said. If someone worked too slowly or complained about anything, the device would give them pain that felt like lightning running through their body. If someone tried to remove the device, it would kill them instantly. Dr. Katie Williams worked in a different section of the same factory. She had once studied planets and stars, but now she spent her time making sure alien machines worked properly. The Zephyrians had learned that humans were very good at finding creative solutions to problems, so they used human intelligence to improve their technology, while keeping humans ignorant about how it all worked together. The aliens had created a system where humans could earn small rewards for working harder than expected. Workers who exceeded their daily quotas could get an extra piece of food or an hour of rest. But if one person in a work group failed to meet their quota, everyone in that group was punished. This made humans watch each other carefully and report anyone who was not working hard enough. Commander Ryan Foster had been captured 3 months after the conquest, when his ship finally ran out of fuel. The aliens sent him to the asteroid mining stations in the Vega system, where he now led a crew of 50 human workers. They used massive machines to dig valuable minerals out of floating rocks in space. The work was dangerous and many people died in accidents every month. Ryan had tried to escape twice, but both times the aliens caught him before he could reach a ship. After the second attempt, they put him in isolation for 6 months where he could not see or speak to any other human. When they let him out, Ryan had learned to be more careful about showing his anger toward the aliens. The Zephyrians believed they understood human psychology completely. They had studied humans for many years before the invasion and thought they knew exactly how to control them. The aliens were proud of how efficiently they had organized human society. Every human had a job, a place to sleep, and enough food to stay alive and work. The aliens thought this was all humans needed to be satisfied. But something was happening that the Zephyrians did not notice. Deep in the factory tunnels and mining shafts, Humans were finding ways to communicate with each other that the compliance monitors could not detect. They developed a system of work songs that sounded like meaningless noise to alien ears, but actually carried messages between different groups of workers. Emma Clark had been a teacher on Earth before the conquest. Now she worked in a facility where human children were raised and educated according to Zephyrian rules. The alien curriculum focused only on teaching children the skills they would need for their future jobs as workers. History, art, music, and literature were forbidden subjects because the aliens believed these things made humans think too much about freedom and independence, but Emma found ways to teach the children about their heritage without the aliens knowing. She told them stories that sounded like simple fairy tales, but were actually about human heroes and human achievements. She taught them songs that seemed to be about work, but actually contained the words of the old human national anthems. She showed them games that appeared to be innocent fun, but actually taught them about human culture and values. The children who grew up in these facilities were different from their parents. They had never known freedom, but they heard about it in Emma's secret lessons. They were also different because they had grown up around alien technology and understood it in ways that older humans could not. The compliance monitors that controlled adult humans did not work as well on children because their brains were still developing. Carl Hughes had been a farmer on Earth who grew food to feed people in the big cities. Now he worked on a planet called Epsilon Eridani 3, where humans were forced to grow crops that could survive in the harsh conditions of many different alien worlds. The Zephyrians needed these hardy crops to feed their workers on planets throughout their empire. Carl noticed something strange about some of the Earth plants he was growing. When humans ate certain vegetables and grains regularly, they seemed to get sick less often and recover faster from injuries. Carl started paying attention to which plants had this effect and began secretly encouraging other workers to eat more of these particular crops. What Carl did not know was that some of the compounds in these Earth plants were slowly damaging the compliance monitors that all humans wore. The effect was very small and took months to become noticeable, but workers who ate these special crops found that their monitors were not as sensitive as before. They could think forbidden thoughts for longer periods without being detected and punished. Dr. Alex Bennett had been moved to a research facility on the Zephyrian homeworld where he worked with other captured scientists from dozens of different species. The aliens wanted him to study human biology so they could make humans work more efficiently and live longer. Alex pretended to cooperate, but actually spent most of his time learning about Zephyrian technology and looking for weaknesses he might be able to exploit. The research facility had access to the most advanced alien computers and communication systems. Alex slowly learned how to use these systems while pretending to work on his assigned projects. He discovered that the Zephyrian Empire was much larger than he had imagined, with millions of different species all working as slaves in factories and mines throughout the galaxy. Alex also learned that humans were not the first species to try rebelling against the Zephyrians. Many others had tried and failed over the centuries, but humans were different in one important way. Every other species the aliens had conquered was used to following orders from a central authority. Humans were used to thinking for themselves and making their own decisions, even when those decisions were wrong. Captain Jake Morrison was still alive but imprisoned in the most secure facility the Zephyrians had. They kept him alive because they wanted to study human leadership abilities and learn how to better control human groups. Jake spent his days answering questions about human military tactics and government systems. He told the aliens what they wanted to hear, while carefully observing everything about their culture and technology. During his years in prison, Jake learned to speak the Zephyrian language and understand their customs. He discovered that the aliens had not always been conquerors. Thousands of years ago, they had been a peaceful species that valued art and philosophy, but they had gradually become dependent on slave labor and had forgotten how to innovate and create on their own. As the 5th year of human slavery began, something new was stirring throughout the Zephyrian Empire. The secret communication networks that humans had built were spreading to other worlds. The resistance songs and coded messages were reaching humans in distant star systems. The special crops that Carl Hughes had discovered were being grown on dozens of planets, slowly weakening the control systems that kept humans enslaved. Most importantly, the children who had grown up under alien rule were now becoming adults, and they were very different from the humans the Zephyrians thought they understood. Dr. Alex Bennett sat in his laboratory on the Zephyrian homeworld and stared at the alien computer screen in front of him. After years of pretending to work on projects for his captors, he had finally made a discovery that could change everything. Hidden deep in the Zephyrian communication systems was something that should not have been there. The aliens were very proud of their quantum communication arrays that allowed instant contact between ships and planets across the entire galaxy. But Alex had found something the Zephyrians had missed for centuries. Long ago, another conquered species had built these systems for their masters and had secretly included a backdoor that could be used to disrupt all communications throughout the Empire. The original builders were called the Vortakians, and they had been enslaved over 800 years ago. Before the Zephyrians completely destroyed their culture, some Vortakian engineers had hidden this weakness in the communication systems as an act of revenge against their oppressors. The backdoor was so cleverly concealed that only someone with both advanced technical knowledge and access to the core systems could find it. Alex realized that if he could activate this backdoor, every Zephyrian ship and base would lose contact with their command centers at the same time. For a species that depended completely on their rigid chain of command, this would create chaos that might give humans the chance they needed to fight back. On the agricultural world of Epsilon Eridani 3, Carl Hughes was discovering something equally important. The earth crops he had been studying for years were having effects that went far beyond making humans healthier. The compounds in certain vegetables were actually interfering with all Zephyrian neural implants, including the ones that the aliens themselves used to maintain their strict social order. Carl had noticed that human workers who ate large amounts of these special crops seemed to think more clearly and remember things better. Their compliance monitors still worked, but not as effectively as before. More importantly, Carl had started secretly feeding some of these crops to Zephyrian overseers who supervised the human workers. The aliens who ate the treated food began acting strangely after several months. They started questioning orders that they would normally follow without thinking. Some even showed what appeared to be sympathy for the human workers under their control. Carl realized that the neural implants that kept all Zephyrians obedient to their superiors were breaking down when exposed to certain earth plant compounds. Captain Jake Morrison had spent years learning everything he could about Zephyrian military structure and technology. His prison was located in the capital city of the alien homeworld, surrounded by the most advanced security systems in their empire. But Jake had discovered something his captors did not realize. Their greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. Every Zephyrian was conditioned from birth to follow orders from higher-ranking individuals without question. Their entire civilization was built on this absolute obedience to authority. But this meant that if someone could convincingly impersonate a high-ranking Zephyrian, lower-ranking aliens would obey their commands even if those commands seemed unusual or dangerous. Jake had learned to speak Zephyrian perfectly and understood their customs better than most aliens did. More importantly, he had studied their military protocols until he could recite them from memory. If he could somehow escape from his prison and reach a communication terminal, he might be able to give orders that would be followed throughout their fleet. The spark that would ignite the human rebellion came from an unexpected source. 10-year-old Jamie Peterson had been born in captivity and raised in one of Emma Clark's childcare facilities. Jamie had never seen Earth or known freedom, but Emma's secret lessons had taught him about human history and the concept of liberty that his people had once fought and died to protect. On a day that started like any other, Jamie was working in the facility's maintenance section when he witnessed something that changed his life forever. A Zephyrian overseer had decided that Jamie's friend Billy needed to be punished for working too slowly, but instead of using the standard electrical shock, the alien chose to make an example by executing Billy's father in front of all the human children. As Jamie watched his friend's father die for no reason except alien cruelty, something broke inside him. All of Emma's stories about human courage and resistance suddenly became real and urgent. Without thinking about the consequences, Jamie screamed words that Emma had taught him about the old days before the conquest. "Remember freedom," Jamie shouted with all the strength in his young voice. The compliance monitor around Jamie's neck immediately activated and sent painful shocks through his body, but the damage was already done. Every human in the facility heard those two words and understood their meaning. Within hours, the phrase had spread to other buildings and other work sites through the secret communication networks that humans had spent years building. Remember Freedom became more than just words. It became a signal that told every human throughout the galaxy that the time for passive resistance was ending, and the time for active rebellion was beginning. The phrase spread faster than the Zephyrians could track or stop it, carried by work songs, maintenance codes, and whispered conversations in dark corners where the alien monitors could not see or hear. Emma Clark knew immediately that everything was about to change when she heard Jamie's cry echoing through the facility. She had spent years preparing for this moment, secretly teaching human children about their heritage and helping them understand that slavery was not the natural state of humanity. Now those children were ready to become the leaders of a revolution that their parents had thought was impossible. Danny Rodriguez received the message while working in his factory on Sarion 7. The words came embedded in a maintenance song that was being sung by workers throughout the massive facility. Danny had been preparing for years by memorizing the layout of every tunnel and corridor in the complex. He had also been secretly modifying some of the alien equipment under his care, making small changes that would become important when the time came to fight. Dr. Katie Williams heard the phrase while running diagnostics on a Zephyrian computer system. She realized immediately that this was the signal they had all been waiting for. Katie had been using her position to map the aliens' power distribution networks and identify the critical systems that kept their facilities running. If those systems could be sabotaged simultaneously, the aliens would lose control of their most important installations. Ryan Foster was working in the asteroid mines when the message reached him, through a coded conversation between two workers who were supposedly discussing ore extraction quotas. Ryan had been using his years in the mines to train other humans in combat tactics disguised as safety procedures. He had also been stockpiling improvised weapons made from mining equipment and industrial tools. All across the galaxy, millions of humans received the same message at almost the same time. Remember Freedom told them that years of secret preparation were about to be put to the test. The compliance monitors that controlled their daily lives would not be enough to stop what was coming, because humans had found ways to work around and weaken those systems through patience and ingenuity. The Zephyrians noticed increased chatter in the human work groups, but interpreted it as excitement about improved productivity quotas. Their artificial intelligence systems detected the phrase, "Remember Freedom," but classified it as a harmless reference to some old human cultural tradition. The aliens had become so confident in their control over humanity that they could not imagine their slaves were capable of organized resistance. But Dr. Alex Bennett was ready to prove them wrong. As reports of Jamie Peterson's cry reached him through the secret networks, Alex knew the time had come to activate the Vortakian backdoor and bring down the Zephyrian communication systems. The rebellion that had been building for years was about to explode into open warfare, and humanity's greatest weapon would not be ships or guns, but the one thing their captors had never understood. The refusal to accept that freedom was impossible. The galaxy was about to learn that enslaving human bodies had been easy, but enslaving the human spirit was beyond the power of any empire, no matter how advanced or ruthless it might be. The rebellion began at exactly the same moment on 17 different worlds across the Zephyrian Empire. Dr. Alex Bennett activated the ancient Vortakian backdoor from his laboratory on the alien homeworld, and instantly every quantum communication array in the galaxy went silent. Zephyrian ships lost contact with their command centers, military bases could not coordinate their defenses, and the rigid hierarchy that held their empire together began to collapse. On the factory world of Zerion 7, Danny Rodriguez felt the compliance monitor around his neck stop working as the alien control systems lost power. All around him, thousands of human workers were experiencing the same liberation as their electronic shackles failed simultaneously. Danny had spent years memorizing every corridor and maintenance tunnel in the massive facility, and now that knowledge became the foundation for humanity's first military victory in over 5 years. The Zephyrian overseers in Danny's section had no idea what was happening when their control devices stopped responding to commands. They had grown lazy during years of easy dominance over human workers, and had forgotten how dangerous humans could be when they were no longer afraid. Danny led a group of workers to the facility's main power core, using maintenance tools as weapons and their intimate knowledge of the building's layout to avoid alien security forces, Dr. Katie. Williams was in the facility's computer center when the communication breakdown occurred. She immediately understood what Alex Bennett had accomplished and began implementing plans she had been preparing for years. Katie started shutting down critical systems throughout the complex while simultaneously broadcasting instructions to human work groups in other sections. Her knowledge of alien technology, gained through years of forced labor, now became a weapon against her former captors. The humans took control of Xerion 7 within 6 hours. They had several important advantages that the Zephyrians had not anticipated. First, humans knew the facility better than the aliens did, because they had been maintaining and operating it for years. Second, the weapons and equipment stored in the factory were things that humans had been building and repairing, so they understood how everything worked. Third, the Zephyrian guards had become complacent and were not prepared to fight an enemy that understood their weaknesses. Ryan Foster's rebellion in the Vega asteroid mines was even more dramatic. When the communication systems failed and the compliance monitors stopped working, Ryan gathered his mining crew and explained something that would have seemed impossible just hours before. They were going to use their industrial equipment and knowledge of the asteroid field to destroy every Zephyrian ship in the system. The aliens had always seen the human miners as simple manual laborers who posed no threat to their powerful warships. But Ryan had been secretly training his people in military tactics disguised as safety procedures, and the mining equipment they used every day could be turned into devastating weapons with small modifications. Plasma cutters became anti-ship guns, drilling platforms became mobile weapons, and cargo shuttles became assault vehicles. Most importantly, Ryan's crew knew every tunnel and hiding place in the asteroid field because they had been working there for years. When Zephyrian patrol ships came looking for the human rebels, they found themselves fighting an enemy that could appear anywhere, strike quickly, and then disappear into passages that were too small for alien vessels to follow. The children raised in captivity proved to be the rebellion's most valuable asset. Jamie Peterson and others like him had grown up around Zephyrian technology and understood it in ways that their parents never could. While adult humans were fighting alien guards with improvised weapons, the children were infiltrating computer systems, sabotaging equipment, and providing intelligence about alien movements and weaknesses. Emma Clark coordinated the youth resistance from her position in the childcare facility. The alien overseers had always considered her harmless because she worked with children, but Emma had been secretly building a network of young rebels who could access areas and systems that were off limits to adult workers. These children became the eyes and ears of the rebellion, reporting on alien troop movements and identifying critical targets for sabotage. Captain Jake Morrison's escape from the maximum security prison on the Zephyrian homeworld was the most audacious operation of the entire rebellion. When the communication breakdown occurred, the prison's automated systems began malfunctioning because they could not receive updates from the central command center. Jake used his knowledge of Zephyrian protocols to convince lower-ranking guards that he was being transferred to another facility on orders from their superiors. Once free, Jake made his way to the military spaceport where he stole a Zephyrian command ship, using forged authorization codes and his perfect understanding of alien procedures. The ship's crew followed his orders without question because they assumed any human giving commands must be acting under the authority of their officers, and the communication breakdown prevented them from verifying his status. Jake immediately broadcast a message that reached every human in the galaxy through the networks that had been secretly built over years of oppression. His words were simple but powerful enough to inspire millions of enslaved people to believe that victory was possible. They thought they broke us, Jake said. They thought they owned us. But they never understood us. We are human. We adapt, we endure. We are coming home. The Zephyrian response to the human uprising was swift and brutal. As soon as their regional commanders realized what was happening, they ordered their remaining fleets to begin bombardments of any world where humans were rebelling. The aliens no longer cared about preserving the infrastructure they had built or protecting the workers they had enslaved. They would rather rule over ruins than lose control of their empire. But the human rebellion had spread too quickly and too widely for the Zephyrians to contain it through military force alone. Carl Hughes's discovery about the Earth plants that interfered with neural implants had already affected hundreds of alien overseers throughout the Empire. Many Zephyrians were beginning to think independently for the first time in their lives, and some were starting to question the brutality of their Empire's response to the rebellion. More importantly, the communication breakdown had allowed other enslaved species throughout the galaxy to learn about the human uprising. For centuries, the Zephyrians had kept their subject races isolated from each other to prevent exactly this kind of coordinated resistance. But now the Altarians, aquatic beings who had served as the Empire's engineers for 300 years, were beginning to realize that their honored position was still a form of slavery. The Mantari, insectoid creatures who had been used as agricultural specialists for over a millennium, started communicating with human rebels and sharing information about Zephyrian vulnerabilities. The crystalline Zerathi, who had been forced to process raw materials in the Empire's most dangerous facilities, began coordinating strikes that shut down mining operations on dozens of worlds. Dr. Alex Bennett's communication hack had accomplished something far more significant than disrupting Zephyrian command structures. For the first time in thousands of years, all the enslaved species in the galaxy were able to talk to each other directly. They discovered that humans were not the first to rebel against their oppressors, just the first to succeed in organizing a galaxy-wide resistance that other species could join. The tide of the war began to turn when Zephyrian fleet commanders started receiving contradictory orders from different parts of their hierarchy. The neural conditioning that had kept their society stable for millennia was breaking down as more aliens were exposed to the compounds in Earth plants. Some commanders ordered increased violence against rebelling worlds, while others began secretly negotiating with human leaders. Admiral Kethvar, the same Zephyrian who had led the original conquest of Earth, was among the first high-ranking aliens to break free from his mental conditioning. The food he had been eating for months contained compounds from Carl Hughes's special crops, and gradually his artificial loyalty to the Empire had dissolved. When Admiral Kethvar looked at what his forces were doing to rebellious worlds, he felt something no Zephyrian had experienced in centuries: shame for his actions and empathy for his victims. The rebellion that had started with one child's cry of "Remember freedom" had become a galaxy-wide revolution that was tearing apart the largest empire in known history. But the real victory was not being won through military battles or technological advantages. It was happening in the minds and hearts of every sentient being who chose freedom over security, cooperation over domination, and hope over despair. The final battle for freedom did not happen in space between mighty fleets or on the surfaces of contested worlds. Instead, it took place in the minds of every intelligent being throughout the galaxy as they chose between the familiar comfort of slavery and the terrifying possibility of liberation. The human rebellion had accomplished something that no one, not even the humans themselves, had thought possible. It had awakened the conscience of an entire galaxy. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship and stared at the orders displayed on his command screen. His superiors were demanding that he destroy 3 worlds where humans and other species were rebelling against Zephyrian rule. Just months before, he would have carried out these orders without hesitation because questioning commands from higher authorities was impossible for a properly conditioned Zephyrian mind. But the neural implants that had controlled his thoughts for his entire life were failing. The compounds from Earth plants that Carl Hughes had discovered were now affecting Zephyrians throughout the Empire. For the first time in over 40 years, Admiral Kethvar was thinking his own thoughts and feeling his own emotions. What he felt was horror at the realization of what his people had become. The Admiral opened a communication channel to Captain Jake Morrison, who was commanding a growing fleet of captured Zephyrian ships, crewed by liberated humans and aliens from other species. "Captain Morrison," Admiral Kethvar said in perfect English, "I want to discuss terms for ending this war." Jake was suspicious at first because he had learned not to trust any Zephyrian, but something in the alien admiral's voice suggested that this was not a trap. During their conversation, Admiral Kethvar provided detailed information about remaining loyalist strongholds and offered to coordinate attacks that would minimize casualties on both sides. "You showed us something we had forgotten," the alien admiral explained. "The value of choice." Dr. Alex Bennett was still on the Zephyrian homeworld, but now he was working freely alongside alien scientists who had also broken free from their mental conditioning. Together they were analyzing the quantum communication systems and discovering just how extensive the rebellion had become. Humans were no longer the only species fighting for freedom. Over 50 different races were now actively resisting Zephyrian control. The Altarians had seized control of the massive engineering platforms where they had been forced to build ships for the Zephyrian fleet. Instead of constructing new warships for their former masters, they were now converting civilian vessels into rescue ships to evacuate refugees from war zones. Their natural ability to work underwater made them perfect for reaching survivors on flooded worlds that Zephyrian forces had abandoned. The crystalline Zarathi had shut down mining operations throughout the Empire by using their unique physiology to infiltrate processing facilities that other species could not survive in. Without access to the raw materials that these mines provided, the Zephyrian war machine was rapidly running out of resources to continue fighting the rebellion. Emma Clark had established communication with resistance leaders on hundreds of worlds through the youth network she had been building for years. The children who had grown up in captivity were now adults, and they possessed a combination of human creativity and technical knowledge about alien systems that made them incredibly effective at sabotage and infiltration missions. Jamie Peterson, the child whose cry had sparked the rebellion, was now leading rescue operations that freed enslaved beings from Zephyrian labor camps. His teams included humans, Altarians, Zarathi, and even some reformed Zephyrians who had chosen to help their former victims. These mixed species groups were more effective than any single race could have been, alone, because each species contributed different strengths and capabilities. Danny Rodriguez had become the chief engineer for the Liberated Factory complex on Zerion 7, which was now producing equipment for the rebellion instead of weapons for the Empire. But more importantly, Danny was working with alien engineers to design new technologies that combined the best innovations from all the freed species. The rigid hierarchy of the Zephyrian Empire had prevented this kind of creative collaboration for thousands of years. Dr. Katie Williams was coordinating the technical aspects of the rebellion from a mobile command center that moved constantly between different star systems. Her team included scientists and engineers from dozens of different species, all working together to understand and counter Zephyrian technology. They had discovered weaknesses in alien systems that the Empire's own engineers had never noticed because diversity of thought had been suppressed for so long. Carl Hughes had become one of the most important people in the galaxy, even though most beings had never heard his name. His discovery about Earth plants that interfered with neural implants was being used to free Zephyrian civilians throughout the Empire. Special crops were being grown on liberated worlds and then distributed through food supplies to break down the mental conditioning that had kept an entire species enslaved to their own leadership. For millennia, Commander Ryan Foster was leading a fleet of converted mining ships and cargo vessels that had become surprisingly effective at disrupting Zephyrian supply lines. His crews knew how to operate in asteroid fields and other dangerous environments that traditional warships could not navigate safely. More importantly, Ryan's forces were rescuing enslaved workers from mining operations and transporting them to safe worlds where they could choose their own futures. The collapse of the Zephyrian Empire was not happening through military conquest, but through the gradual realization by billions of beings that they had other options. Zephyrian worlds that had been loyal for centuries began declaring independence as their populations broke free from neural conditioning. Some chose to join the growing galactic cooperative that humans and other liberated species were establishing. Others preferred isolation to work through the psychological trauma of discovering that their entire civilization had been built on oppression. Captain Jake Morrison found himself in command of a fleet that included ships and crews from over 30 different species, all united by their commitment to freedom and self-determination. But Jake understood that military victory was not enough to ensure lasting peace. The new galaxy that was emerging from the ruins of the Empire would need institutions and agreements that prevented any single species from dominating others. The galactic cooperative that formed during the final months of the war was based on principles that humans had developed during their own history of struggle against oppression. Every species would govern itself according to its own values and traditions. Participation in cooperative projects would be voluntary, and no species would be forced to contribute resources or labor against its will. Conflicts would be resolved through negotiation and compromise rather than force. Dr. Alex Bennett was chosen to chair the committee that drafted the cooperative's founding charter because he had been instrumental in breaking down the communication barriers between species. The document they created was not perfect, but it established a framework for peaceful coexistence that had never existed in the galaxy before. Most importantly, it included provisions for helping former slave species rebuild their cultures and recover from the trauma of generations of oppression. The war officially ended not with a great battle, but with a simple announcement that spread throughout the galaxy in hundreds of different languages. The Zephyrian Empire had ceased to exist, and every intelligent being was now free to choose their own destiny. Some former Zephyrian worlds asked to join the Galactic Cooperative immediately. Others requested time to develop new forms of government before making any commitments. A few attempted to maintain the old imperial system, but found that their populations were no longer willing to support authoritarian rule. Admiral Kethvar became one of the first reformed Zephyrians to serve in the cooperative's peacekeeping forces, working alongside humans and other species to prevent conflicts and protect vulnerable populations. His knowledge of former imperial strongholds proved invaluable in locating hidden slave camps and secret facilities where beings were still being held against their will. The galaxy had been transformed by the human spirit's refusal to accept permanent defeat. But the victory belonged to all the species that had chosen cooperation over domination. Emma Clark often reflected on the irony of what had happened during her speeches to mixed audiences throughout the cooperative. "They enslaved us to harvest our creativity and adaptability," she would say. "In the end, those very qualities didn't just free us, they freed everyone, including our captors. They forgot that the human spirit can't be chained, only temporarily contained. And when it breaks free, it lifts everyone around it." 50 years after the rebellion began, the galaxy was still healing from millennia of oppression, but it was also discovering possibilities that no one had imagined during the dark years of the Empire. Children grew up learning about dozens of different cultures and choosing which traditions they wanted to follow. Scientists from different worlds worked together on projects that combined knowledge from hundreds of species. Artists created works that expressed the diversity and wonder of a free galaxy.